with news breaking today that the Vegas Raiders are keeping interim head coach Antonio Pierce as their coach, I'm going to be going down the other 6 openings in the NFL for head coach positions and who I think fits the role best and who I think they'll ultimately hire. First off, though, we'll go over Antonio Pierce. I think this is a fantastic hire for the Raiders. I was personally a big fan of Rich Bisaccia when he was their interim coach a couple years ago after Gruden was let go. And I think they should have kept him then. And I think going to get McDaniels was a mistake back then. And I think going to get a different coach than Pierce would have been a mistake now. You saw Max Crosby and a bunch of other players voice their support for him, with Crosby even going as far as saying that he would not want to play for the Raiders if they didn't bring back Pierce. This was definitely the right move. The players forced the Raiders' hand. They had to go get Pierce, but I don't think that was much of a settle. I think Vegas got one of the best guys available in Antonio Pierce. But moving on, we'll go to the biggest head coach available this offseason in Bill Belichick. I think Bill Belichick personally is going to the Falcons. I think it's the best spot for him. I think they have the best built roster. They have a talented offense with Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and Bijan Robinson, along with all-pro guard Chris Lindstrom. And they have a great defense led by Jesse Bates, who just had a career season down in Atlanta. This team, though, drastically needs a quarterback, but they do have $25 million available in cap space, and they hold the 8th overall pick. So if you give Belichick the reins, he definitely can either select a quarterback, trade up for a quarterback, or even sign one out of free agency to help build this roster. I think it's the perfect spot for Bill to spend a couple years before he retires and maybe even bring this Falcons team to the deep playoff run or even a Super Bowl. Moving on, we got the Commanders. The Commanders have been an absolute mess of a franchise. They finally got rid of Dan Snyder. They finally let go of Ron Rivera, which I feel like they should have done after last season. And now, I think with their new GM, Adam Peters, they're going to go and get a guy like Mike Vrabel from Tennessee. When Peters was asked about a new head coach, he said he didn't want an offensive or defensive coach. He wanted the guy to be the best leader for the organization. There's no guy that's a better leader than Mike Vrabel. Vrabel led a Tennessee franchise that was kind of stuck in the mud to a 1 seed, multiple division titles, and finished his time in Tennessee with a 56-48 record. Vrabel's a loved head coach. He's a respected head coach. He's a great defensive guy. He's a solid offensive guy. He's had teams that are great together. You can't do that without being the 1 seed, and I think he's the perfect decision to take over this Commanders franchise. Moving on to the Titans, I have them picking up a AFC division rival coordinator in Bobby Slowick. Slowick's a fast riser in the head coaching ranks, as he's been the offensive coordinator for the Texans this past season, and he's led them with a very young roster and CJ Stroud at quarterback to the divisional round of the playoffs. He's led Stroud to be one of the best rookie quarterbacks we've seen in recent years, and if he heads to the Titans, he has a good-looking quarterback in Will Levis and $70 million in cap space to work with, which allows him to build this offense however Slowick wants. He also already has a relationship with the Titans GM, Rand Carthon, as the pair worked together for the 49ers from 2017 to 2022. I think this is just a match made in heaven. Moving on to the Seahawks, I have them also hiring a former head coach in Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn. When Seattle and Pete Carroll parted ways last week, it was a bit of a surprise to me. I heard Carroll didn't want to retire. I thought he was going to come back because he's been a fantastic coach for them and helped them win a Super Bowl and appear in another one. But if they're going to go on to another guy, I think Dan Quinn's the best option. In the 2 years that Pete Carroll took the Seattle team to the Super Bowl, he had the same defensive coordinator for both those years, Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn led that team to the best defense in the NFL and one of the best we've seen since the 2000 Ravens, back-to-back years, by absolutely having a loaded squad. After that, he went on to Atlanta and had a pretty successful coaching career, leading that team to the Super Bowl. They didn't end up winning. They had the biggest choke in history against the Patriots with a 28-3 lead. But I think he has a lot of experience. I think he's a good guy. He has the Seattle ties, and I think it's the perfect signing for them. Moving on, we got the Chargers. The Chargers cannot afford to experiment with a new head coach again. You can't go out and sign a coordinator who has no experience. You need a guy like Jim Harbaugh. Harbaugh's coming off a championship with Michigan Wolverines in college football. He's already had NFL head coaching experience with the 49ers, where he took them to a Super Bowl and had them as a pretty dominant squad for quite a few years before that roster fell apart. I think Harbaugh is the only guy other than Belichick you can bring in for LA. Belichick seems to have interest in the Atlanta job, and the Chargers don't seem to really love Belichick too much, so I think this move is perfect and fantastic for the Chargers, as they bring in a guy with experience before they eventually may lose out on a guy like Justin Herbert, who wants out if this team doesn't build around him. Lastly, we have the Carolina Panthers. I think the Panthers are going to bring in Ben Johnson. I love Ben Johnson personally as a coordinator. He's done a fantastic job with this Lions team. This Lions offense has been dominant this year, and he's absolutely played to their strengths, and I think he can do the same in Carolina. Carolina is not really a sought-after position for many head coach candidates, as back-to-back seasons they fired coaches halfway through the season, and David Tepper is not looking great in the media after throwing a drink on an opposing Jaguars fan. But I think if Ben Johnson can get them commit to giving him the reins for at least 3 seasons, with no pressure, he can build around Bryce Young. He can build this offense to his liking and build this offensive line that's been absolutely abysmal and lead this Carolina team into the promised land, which I think Bryce Young can help do. That's why I have being the head coaches of the future in the NFL this offseason. Let me know down below if you have any other opinions or any other guys that you think are getting hired, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.